about, right? I'm not saying that people are consciously aware that this is how they think, but this is the functional outworking of how most people in modern society think. Okay, so what do you mean by like neutral facts? It means that's just the way things are, right? If you, oh yeah, thanks, I'll take another pen. If you dig down deep enough to, when you ask them, why is, I don't know, this thing wrong or this thing right? You know, you might be able to get down a couple levels where they give you reasons, but eventually it's going to be, well, that's just the way it is, right? Why does nature work regularly, for example? You know, I drop this pen, it's always going to go down. Well, you know, again, you might be able to peel back a couple layers, but eventually you're going to get to the point where they're saying, it's just the way it is. That's just the law of gravity. That's just logic. That's just whatever. It's ultimately, these are neutral facts that just are somehow, right? There's no reason behind them. And so that requires human interpretation to put those facts into a coherent understanding of the world. That is going to cause us problems, right? So normally this means we are going to be very reliant on authorities. And let me preface here that authorities are not bad in themselves. God gives us authorities. The problem becomes when you're working in this kind of system. That's when authorities suddenly take on unhealthy roles, right? And why do we need authorities? Well, because we can't know everything. We're not experts in everything. We rely on, Frank isn't here. I was going to use Frank as my example, but like Frank's an authority on cars, right? If you ask me what's wrong with my car, I have no idea. All I know about my car is that I push one pedal and it goes, and I push the other one and it stops. I need to go to Frank, who has that authority and has that understanding, and he can tell me, this is what's wrong with your car, this is what you need to do to fix it, okay? Nothing wrong with that as long as human authority is in its proper place. We're gonna pause there, just keep this in mind, okay? So let's talk about the Christian worldview. Obviously only one worldview is correct, that's the Christian worldview. Just gonna draw a little line here. Okay. So, what composes the Christian worldview? Well, first of all, we start off with God. Okay? God is the foundation for everything real. He is the foundation for everything that's real. He is the ultimate foundation. Everything gets its existence and meaning from God. Okay, so the Christian worldview says, God gives meaning. Sorry, I'm probably not writing this big enough for people in the back. My apologies. God gives meaning to the facts. He is the one that comes first, and he instantiates his meaning into the facts of the world. Nothing just is, right? It's because God gives meaning and interpretation to the things that are. Does that make sense? Let me pause there. Questions about that?
Can you give an example?
Sure. So let's go back to the kind of the laws of nature, like gravity, right? So for up here, where does the law of gravity come from? Well, it just is, right? It's just this neutral thing that exists. I don't know. I mean, really, that is kind of where it boils down to. If I mean, even very sophisticated or seemingly sophisticated, I guess I should say, people will get there eventually if they're working from an unbelieving worldview. What is the law of gravity in the Christian understanding? Well, it's how God regularly, providentially governs his world, right? Why does it have regularity? Why doesn't it always change or slightly alter or something? Because it's based in the one who is faithful. It's based in God's character and nature. Does that make sense? Okay. That's a good question. Any others? Yeah, Tim. No, it's a little bit different from that. It's a little bit different from that. We're going to get into that next week, so keep that in mind, because that is kind of one of the things we'll talk about. But this is really more not about. First cause, you usually talk about motion or something like that. At least that's where my mind goes when we're talking about it. This is more like God gives meaning and interpretation to everything. Now, ultimately, yes, he is the ultimate cause of everything as well. So you could view it that way as well. Yeah. Okay. So God is absolute. Oh, it's too small. Okay, God's absolute. He isn't defined or limited by anything else, right? He's not looking to some sort of outside standard to tell him what is good or what is reasonable or what is true. All of those things flow from him, okay? He's personal. Okay, he's not an impersonal force, right? He loves, he plans, he chooses, he speaks. Tremendously important. Okay? He's perfect. He possesses every good characteristic to the maximum degree. Okay, so he's the source of wisdom, the source of power, the source of goodness. He is Trinity. Okay, so one God exists eternally as three persons. They're not parts of God. Each person is wholly God, right? Everything else in the Christian worldview subsequently follows from these aspects of God. Okay, so specifically with the triune nature, we're gonna talk about this next week a little bit more. So the triune nature is expressed analogically in creation, right? So God has, because he is one God in three persons, he has unity in the one, and there's also diversity within God in his triune nature with the three persons, okay? So analogically, it's not exactly a one-to-one thing, but in creation, we see things that have both unity and diversity. We're going to talk about that more next week. But to give an example, so let's say you have, humanity, it has unity in that we are all humans, right? There's diversity in that I am different from Evan, right? So you have that, there's the world displays unity, diversity. Okay, questions about that? All right. Second part of the Christian worldview is creation. Okay, so God is the creator and sustainer of all things. Okay. He gives creation its rational order and structure, kind of as we already talked about. That's going to come into play next week where we go into more, and I should have said what we're doing next week before continually referring to it. Next week is where we start going into more of the arguments and applying the Christian worldview and doing probably maybe what you more naturally think of apologetics when you think of apologetics. Okay, so rational order of things. Let's see here. All the facts of creation have meaning. Creation has meaning. I'm thinking of Psalm 19, right, where it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The creation is not just some big machine, right? The things that God creates have meaning. They point to him, okay? They're not neutral, to kind of go back to that idea of neutral facts. God has absolute control over creation. Nothing happens outside of his will. And he's personally involved in his creation. He's personally involved in his creation. He doesn't wind it up and throw it out and let it run and just kind of sit back from afar and watch it unwind. Okay. Questions about any of that? Okay. It's a tiny picture of a house. I'm going to erase that. Next element of the Christian worldview is humanity. Okay. So God created mankind in his image. When I think of being created in the image of God, I think back to something I read around the time of my college years, and was written by somebody I knew. A nice guy. I'm not trying to bash on him. I mean, if you went back and looked at some of the things I said when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I would be cringing at things that I said. So not trying to cast aspersions on him. But he wrote something about how being made in God's image is only the fact that we are reasonable, right? It's the only thing that's different from us, that separates us from other creatures. Now, certainly being reasonable is part of it. That's not what being in the image of God means, right? So Geerhardus Vos, I'm not going to write it out because it's a longer quote, but Geerhardus Vos, he was a Reformed theologian in the early 20th century, late 19th century. He says that man bears God's image means much more that he is spirit and possesses understanding, will, etc. It means above all that he is disposed for communion with God, that all the capacities of his soul can act in a way that corresponds to their destiny only if they rest in God. Okay. God defines who and what man is. Man exists with a predetermined purpose, right? God doesn't just throw man out there and say, well, let's see what happens, right? No. God creates man to be in eternal fellowship with him. That is what we are made for, to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Male and female created equally. Okay? We have different roles, but we're created equally. Questions about that? Okay. D, next aspect of the Christian worldview, sin. Okay, so this is getting into what's wrong with the world. Okay. Humanity sinned. The world is subsequently cursed. So Anderson, in this chapter that we're going through in his book, kind of describes the world as like a ruined castle, right? Still has elements of its original design, yet it's fallen into ruin through man's sin, and God has cursed it. That's brought in a great change to the world. Man subsequently is condemned. We're born in sin, which is explaining, again, what is wrong with the world. Okay. E, special revelation. Okay, God has not abandoned us. Even in the midst of our sin, God has not abandoned us. He has communicated through his prophets, which is written down in his word, which is the Bible. This ultimately culminates in Christ, who is as Anderson describes it, God speaking in human form. Okay. So special revelation, God's word, is our guide to tell us how we should view the world. So when I look out on the world, we're not saying, I find this to be an intuitive understanding of the world, therefore it's correct. Very often that's what we want to do, right? Because that's kind of the default understanding of our society. And as Christians, we need to say, no, I need to look to Scripture to give me the proper lenses to understand the world around me. Questions, comments about that? Okay. Next up, salvation. Okay, so we're fallen in sin, and we can't fix that situation ourselves. Right? One thing you're going to find with non-believing worldviews is that they want to save the world themselves, right? Because, going back to this, right? Human interpretation, human authority are the ultimate authorities. They're the ones that are going to tell us what's wrong, what we need to do to fix it. Okay? All right. So, salvation is not plan B, right? It's not like God was caught off guard and he says, now I gotta save these people somehow. No, the plan has been in place from before the beginning. Right? Salvation is accomplished by God, taking on flesh. Jesus is both God and man, and lives the perfect life so that he can give, so his righteousness can be given to us. Right? The atonement, we talk about the atonement a lot, that's when Christ takes the penalty for our sin on the cross. And then ultimately resurrection. Death cannot hold him, and because he rose, we will rise also. And when we rise, humanity, that's where humanity finds its purpose and its meaning and its ultimate goal. Okay. So we're justified from our sins, we're justified from our sins by faith alone. So we're forgiven, adopted, and changed to be like Christ. Any questions about that? Okay, and then finally, the end. Okay, Christ will return. People will be resurrected either to life or to eternal death. Eternity will be with the Lord, or people will be in eternity in hell. The new heavens and the new earth will finally bring creation to its telos. Does anybody know what a telos is? Yeah.
The end purpose.
Yeah, the end purpose, the end goal. Yep. So all of creation is being brought to its telos. That telos, as I said, it's not as though that's a plan B, right? You will find a lot of, even in non-reformed denominations, like with Lutherans, for example, they tend to think that the goal of Adam was to essentially just continue on as he was, right? There was no end goal per se. The Reformed view is very different. The Reformed view believes that had Adam passed the probationary period with the covenant of works, Adam and the rest of creation would have reached its telos, would have been glorified, would have been changed ultimately to what it was supposed to be in the end. Okay, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Questions about that? No? Okay, so hopefully as you can see, this is giving us a story of the world, right? It's the story of the world. It tells us where we came from. It tells us where we're going. We're telling us how those things are accomplished. Okay, questions, comments? Yeah?
Where does the dominion mandate and like Isaiah and Habakkuk that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea, like as our entire work through humanity, where does that fit into this?
So I don't know where, so what I want to, so first of all, let me preface this by saying I'm not entirely sure because I haven't looked into those verses and thought through that. What I want to say off the cuff, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's talking about how the gospel will go out throughout the world and that the world will ultimately be completely renewed and glorified in the new heavens and the new earth. David, am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's how Calvin has it. Not that Calvin's always right.
There you go. Yeah, good question. All right, any other questions? Okay, so now we're going to do something fun. At least I think it's going to be fun. Actually, I shouldn't have erased that. So I'll just erase it. Okay, so we're going to go back a couple years to everyone's favorite time in recent history, COVID. And we're going to look at how worldview affected people's reactions to COVID. Okay. And there's probably some people here that are young enough that don't remember COVID. Do you remember COVID, young man? Oh, you do? Okay. All right. Sorry. I guess you're old. All right. So, as we said, so let's start off with kind of the unbelieving worldview. And let me preface this by saying we all fall into an unbelieving worldview at times, right? We largely, well, we're certainly born into it because we're born into sin, and our culture consistently reinforces that. So when I say an unbelieving worldview, I'm not saying that Christians can't act in this way, right? We can fall into those same mistakes, and we need to be humbled. This isn't about, look at those stupid people looking at the world the wrong way. That's not the intention here, right? So we'll talk about what's the unbelieving worldview and how did people react because of it, and then how does the Christian worldview react to something like COVID? Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this since I erased it. Okay, remember, unbelieving worldview, facts, human meaning, because I don't want to write interpretation again. All right, human meaning. Okay, and that is going to be dependent on authorities. Okay, let's list some authorities. What authorities are out there?
Center for Disease Control.
Okay, sure, CDC. Institutions in general. Sure, what else?
Anthony Fauci.
Okay, we're going to get to Anthony Fauci. We don't need to throw out actual names at this point. Just, like general things. General things. Sure. Okay. Science. We can say that. Science. Parents. Sure. Parents are considered authorities. What else?
The IRS.
The government. We'll say the government.
Lesser magistrates, like sheriffs?
Sure. Other magistrates. Yeah. Incidentally, this is way off base, but I'm going to say it anyways. So recently I found out that the IRS came up with an emergency plan in the 1960s. So if the US experienced a massive nuclear attack and they anticipated half the population, maybe more, was dead, they came up with a way where they could still collect income tax from people, or tax in general, which I'm like, it's hilarious and it doesn't surprise me in the least. Yeah, Mark. What's that? Okay, we're going to say labs. Sure. I feel like we're already kind of leaning into things. I just meant general things like regulatory agencies, think tank, the church. Yep. Okay, so examples of authorities. Okay, I guess for some people, Augustine might be a particular authority. Yeah. So again, nothing wrong with authorities. Authorities are good. They are given to us by the Lord. The problem becomes when they're put into this type of structure. I want to reiterate that. Okay, so you have authorities existing. We have media, whose job is to essentially be a go-between between authorities and the general public, right? They filter, they package, they present information. So that's important, not because they have some sort of ulterior motive or it's sinister somehow. It just gives you the impression, by the time the information tends to get to us, that this is a very clean, straightforward, there's no contest here, this is just what it is. Most of the time, when everything's going okay, you can maybe start looking away from the problems that this presents, right? We can paper over those problems. Yes, failures occur, right? Sometimes we have, let's say the FDA approves a drug and that drug ultimately is shown to have terrible side effects, right? Usually affects a very limited number of people, doesn't affect the entire population, and it usually trickles out over time. So when COVID hits, we see the authorities scrambling, right? You have authority A saying you should do this. You should mask up, social distance. You have authority B saying, no, that's not right. Then you have authority A going back and saying, well, actually, I said that, but let's do this instead. Or actually, then let's do this, right? There's waffling. You don't get that nice, clean presentation like you do in normal times. Okay, that's a huge, huge, huge problem if you are working from the position that human meaning interprets facts, and human meaning is ultimate. If your authorities are, suddenly everything is coming apart, right? It's not just a question of what should I do to mitigate risk in this situation? It's your whole understanding of how reality works is coming apart at the seams. I think that explains why people reacted like they did, right? Yes, COVID's a very scary thing. I'm not trying to say that's something it's nothing, right? No, a lot of people died because of COVID, right? We've had plagues in the past, and you haven't seen this kind of fracturing of society. And I think that's because society wasn't as engaged in this notion of human meaning being ultimate, right? There's some element that's always there because of sin, but it perhaps was not as progressed as it is in our time. So what happens? So suddenly we have two camps. Well, we had two camps before this, but it becomes much more obvious. We have the left and we have the right. Okay? So we have heroes on the left. Oof, it's too tiny. Heroes and authorities. And yeah, somebody said, who's a hero and authority for the left? Somebody said it earlier. Fauci. Okay, yeah, Fauci. Fauci's science. Okay? We have heroes on the right. Who's the heroes on the right? No. Does anybody remember?
Ron DeSantis.
What's that?
Ron DeSantis.
Yes, potentially. So that's good. So you might add Cuomo. Cuomo was very popular during COVID. He had a downfall after that, but during COVID, he was seen as one of the heroes. Yeah, so you could say DeSantis. Just to keep it symmetrical here, I'm going to write Bhattacharya. Does anybody remember Dr. Bhattacharya? Okay, so Dr. Bhattacharya was one of the, I think he's actually the head of the CDC now under Trump, I don't remember. But he helped write the Great Barrington Declaration, which said, we don't need to do lockdowns, right? That was countered by the John Snow Memorandum on the other side saying, yes, we do need to do lockdowns. Those guys are idiots. And they're saying, no, those guys are idiots, right? So, okay, so heroes, Bhattacharya, and who else? Come on, you can name the other guy's side. Which? No, Trump. We're going to go with Trump, right? Trump was looked at as the hero. Cuomo, hero for the left. Okay, so villains. Who are the villains for the left? Trump, yeah. And dissenting experts like Bhattacharya. Dissenters. Okay, who are the villains for the right? Fauci, yeah. Maybe Cuomo, I don't know, that was probably, I won't say Cuomo. I heard a lot of bad things about Cuomo from right-leaning people at that time. All right. Media. The left gets its information from a very particular media, a well of media. What's the media for the left? CNN. Sure, CNN, MSNBC. I think it's MS Now, MSNBC. We'll say New York Times. Okay, what's the media for the right? Sure, Fox, Daily Wire, Rogan. Okay. All right. The left says we have to, what's the main thing for the left? This has to be our goal as we go through this. Sorry, I'm spitting for those in the front row. You may get splashed. Save lives. We have to save lives. What's the main goal for the right? Yep, save liberties. All right. How do you get saved, per se? Yes, that's true. How do you get saved from COVID? Physically. Yeah. Masks, vaccine.
Social distancing.
Distance, yep. How can you get physically saved from COVID on the right? Hydroxychloroquine. Ivermectin. What will hurt you if you're on the left? Physically hurt you. What will physically hurt you? What will physically hurt you? If you don't do mask, vaccine, distance, and do something else, what's going to hurt you? No, I'm probably not phrasing it right. It's the opposite. It's ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. Don't take ivermectin. Don't take hydroxychloroquine. Okay? What's going to hurt you on the right? Vaccines. Yep. Okay. Trust the science. You heard a lot of trust the science over here. That was a phrase that, I don't know, I can't write anything tonight. That was a phrase used by the left. Didn't come as a phrase on the right, but it was the kind of the, well, science backs us up is actually what I think I heard. Now maybe you probably did hear some of that, right? Is this correct science? Right, science backs us up, right? Do your own research. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin have been on the market for years. They're safe. The science backs that up. We don't know anything about mRNA vaccines. That's dangerous and it's being rushed. And that's not good science, right? So why should we trust these authorities over here instead of our authorities over here? Okay. Okay, let's see. People who oppose us are bad. You want to kill grandma. People who oppose us are bad. You want to control us, right? Okay, so both groups are functionally they're in the same room when it comes to worldview a lot of times. They're going to different corners of the room, but they're still functioning in that basic worldview, right? So both groups believe facts are neutral and human interpretation is ultimate. Again, are people going to be consistent in how they work that out? No, they're not, right? And that's why I said it's easy for Christians to fall into this trap. But we can still fall into it, right? Ultimately, those groups are just picking different authorities, right? Because the human authorities are ultimate. So I'm going to go with these heroes and authorities. No, we're going with these heroes and authorities. And everything else flows out from that, right? That's why it becomes a moral issue, right? This is not, if you weren't seeing this, if this wasn't the structure which people were operating under, you would see the reactions would be different, right? You might disagree with somebody and say, I don't think that's right. I think this is probably the better way to go. But it doesn't immediately become moralized to the point where you are my enemy and you're a bad person and you're trying to do something bad. Okay. Questions about that, because that's a lot. Okay. So what's the Christian worldview again? God. God gives meaning to the facts. Okay. The Lord says what's true. The Lord tells us what matters, what we should do. Okay? We may not have all the answers because we're not God, and that's okay, right? You can vaccinate or not, mask or not, it doesn't threaten the nature of the world. The extreme reactions where people are talking about how it feels like the world is coming undone or their world is ending or something is because the whole foundation of how they view things is being threatened with COVID. Okay, when our foundation is the Lord, things can be scary, things can be difficult, but it's not the world coming apart at the seams. Okay, so we can be patient with people. We can forgive errors. We can understand, look, of course Fauci's gonna make mistakes, right? This is a pretty unprecedented, at least in our lifetime, event, right? He's flying by the seat of his pants like anybody would be. He's gonna make suggestions and he's gonna bring it back. That's just, people are not perfect, and we can give people that grace and understanding, right? Science is helpful in this, but it's subordinate. It's not the be-all, end-all, and it doesn't tell us how the world should be, right? We have, in this worldview, science has essentially taken the part of the all-encompassing framework for everything. That's going to tell you how to do things right. That's going to tell you what's wrong. That's going to tell you how to get saved. That's going to warn you against getting in danger. Okay. We can do this. We can apply this to other issues, right? I mean, this is a very similar issue, but I was thinking vaccinations, right? I'm not talking about COVID vaccinations, just vaccinations in general. Okay? I'm an RN. I like vaccinations. My kids are vaccinated, right? I would encourage you to vaccinate your kids. It's okay if you don't, right? You have to be the one to faithfully make decisions in light of what the Lord has called you to, right? As your elder, will be happy to guide you, but I don't have the right to tell you, you need to get vaccinated, and if you don't, you're a bad person, right? You're a danger to other people around you. I'm not going to say that, right? We approach it with everything has risks. There are pros, there are cons. We start realizing that we're slipping into this worldview if it's super, 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 super important that everybody gets vaccinated, or if it's super, super, super important that nobody gets vaccinated, right? We're starting to lose the strand of the story if we find ourselves moving in that direction. Okay, does that make sense? And I think that's it with my trademark abrupt endings. Yes, David.
I thought that was really good, brother. One of the ways it comes through, I appreciate your point you're making that when we lose God at the center, we start taking big swings of morality, where you attribute morality to decisions that we disagree with or agree with. And one of the things that's been really interesting for me, I think COVID and since then, and it's a good measuring kind of point of what you're talking about, is obviously probably a lot of us are very conservative, but you find conservatives more and more speaking about government as if government itself was evil and always bad.
Yeah.
Which is a moral statement. However upset we are about our government, the Bible is the ultimate authority, which says government is a minister of the Lord, it is for good, government's a good thing. And so it's another example of when, however frustrated we might be, and whatever opinions we have, as accurate and good as they might be, that's an example of when, because we've kind of slipped more and we've got so upset, that we're now saying things about something that's not what God says about the facts.
Yes.
And I just noticed, that's another one, kind of like the COVID example, where you can see are we actually talking about it the way God does, or have we let our concern for this issue change the tenor of our language?
Right.
So I thought you had a really good paradigm there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, and you can see, yeah, and so it starts working itself out in other ways, right? Like, I mean, you can look at, I don't know, kind of like conspiracy type theory thinking as well. That's associated with, those authorities are bad. They're telling you lies because these authorities over here, these are the right ones. Well, no, you can say, again, whether they're my opponent or not, they might be telling the truth in this case. It doesn't mean I have to agree with them on everything, and I don't agree with them on everything, but that doesn't mean that everything they're saying is a nefarious lie. Yeah. Yeah, Evan.
So I really like your definition of the Christian worldview, saying that God gives meaning to facts, that being a part of it, and that at the beginning you were saying like, nothing is just the way that it is because it's the way that it is. In reality, that's not the truth. But I guess from a Christian perspective, how should we understand that idea on a foundational level, right? Like if I'm talking to someone, they might say, "Oh, morally it's wrong to steal from your neighbor."
Mm-hmm.
They say, "Why? They have no justification for that." As a Christian, if they say, "Okay, what's your justification?" We say, "Oh, it's wrong because God is good." Like that's like we tie it back to God's nature. But how do we actually understand that idea of like, okay, really, why though is stealing wrong? If that makes sense, or why things wrong? I can assent to the idea, but how should I really be understanding that translation?
Sure. So we'll talk a little bit about this next week, but let me give it a shot now. So when we're saying stealing is wrong, right? Why is it wrong? Well, fundamentally because the Lord says it's wrong, right? And because his nature is perfectly good and righteous. Right? I mean, that is who he is. Goodness comes from him. Righteousness, excuse me. He tells us what is right and what is wrong, right? So the pushback you give to the non-believer is, you say that this is wrong, right? And they'll say, yeah, it's wrong. Okay, well, what foundation do you have for saying anything's wrong, right? According to the unbelieving worldview, there is no meaning, there's no purpose. You are a random collection of atoms, and eventually you're going to dissolve, and eventually everything's going to dissolve, and there's no meaning, there's no nothing, right? Now, they're not going to most of the time, want to bite the bullet in that way and agree with that. They're going to kind of say, well, I think stealing's wrong because I don't like it if somebody steals against me, and if we don't say stealing's wrong, everybody's going to be stealing, and somebody's going to steal against me. Well, that's not a moral argument. That's a pragmatic argument, right? That's saying I don't prefer something, and in order to avoid the thing I don't prefer or get the thing I do prefer, I think we should do X, Y, and Z. That's not a moral argument. A moral argument is like, no, this is wrong, no matter what I feel about it, right? Because I'm not the one who is the foundation for determining what's right and what's wrong. The Lord is.
Yeah, so I think an extension of that question would probably just be like, because we're tying it back to God's nature, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't say necessarily it's only wrong because God communicates to us that it is wrong. We would say it's wrong because God's nature is not so, right? Like at its core level, like foundational.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if functionally that's much different. I think I know where you're getting at, but I mean, God expresses his nature. He expresses who he is, right? He is good. He is righteous. Righteousness and goodness find their definition in God, and then expresses. What I wouldn't want to, I think where we want to be careful is we don't want to give the impression that there's this thing, you have God here, and then there's goodness up here, and God looks at goodness and says, okay, that's what goodness is. Now I'm going to do that, and I'm going to give the law because of that. No. God is above all things. God is the definer of goodness, right? And people are going to push back against that because they don't like the fact, we as sinners don't like the fact that God is the ultimate standard. We want to look away from him and we want to look to something else. And so, yeah, if you say to him, look, God's the source of all goodness. He's the source. What he says is good. What he says is right. People are going to push back. Why? Not because that's the wrong answer. It's because they don't like that answer. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Good questions. Yeah.
So to go along kind of with what Pastor was saying about people on the right, or maybe even Christians more so on the right side, kind of condemning government or authority overall, would you say that that may be because what we kind of see is God is obviously the ultimate authority, but any authority given on this earth is almost always, what's the word? Oh, it's literally leaving my head. It's not Christ-like authority. It's always, oh my goodness, I can't think of a specific word. Corrupt, I guess.
Yeah. You want to take it? No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And to put in context of this class and this book and the way Sean's saying is absolutely, we see the corrupt nature of things. And it's easy, I think to Sean's point, if we simply view things by the meaning we give them, the corruptness of them can become overwhelming, right? And so you think about bad government, and you think about the Nazis and the Soviets and the Khmer Rouge, and it gets overwhelming. And we go, oh, we just ought not to have government. But rather than focusing on our lived-in reality, which I think is kind of this point is, we ought to start with God and how he views something. And then that gives us a benefit where we can always judge what we see against God's standard and lovingly, protest or say no or point to the right answer, but we retain the value of it. And I think what's helpful, particularly with government, is in Reformed theology, we generally think of that there are three broad spheres of authority, and one is the government, but another one is the church, and another one is parents. And so, yes, government is often very corrupt and very bad, so are churches. But you do sometimes see self-professed Christians saying, oh yeah, no, church, I'm a Christian, I don't go to church. That would be kind of like being, I'm an American, but I don't have a government. You do, whether or not you choose to accept it. Or, my parents are mean to me, so I don't have parents. So which is another thing you see a lot in culture, right, is this found family. If my parents say something mean to me, I should never have to talk to them again. And so I think it's a great question, but overemphasizing how corrupt or broken something is falling prey to this concept of judging it by our experience of it, rather than God as the ultimate source and our comfort.
Yeah, and culturally, Americans do not like authority all that much, right? So we also have that going against us where it feels natural for us to scorn authority, which is not good, right? Believe me, I'm Irish. We love scorning authority, and I have to fight against that, right? And say no, actually this authority was placed over me by God, and I need to show this authority respect and the honor that it deserves. So does that mean that they're going to be sinful? Yes, it means it's going to be sinful, right? Does that mean how do I overcome evil? You overcome evil with good, right? Yeah.
So what about Bonhoeffer kind of fighting against the Nazis? I've heard some people say, oh, he shouldn't have done this.
Don't get me started on Bonhoeffer. I don't like Bonhoeffer.